Coming Home. Part 1. The Letter. Elliot Carter hadn't spoken to his father in nearly 17 years. He didn't leave with a fight. No slammed doors, no shouted words, just a quiet departure. A single suitcase, a half-empty bank account, and a one-way bus ticket out of the small town of Maple Hollow. He had never planned to return, but life, as Elliot had come to understand, has a strange way of folding back in on itself, circling, pressing, pulling. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, a thin white envelope with his name written in a shaky hand he hadn't seen since boyhood. "Elliot," it began, "if this finds you, I hope you'll come home. I'm not well. There are things we left unsaid, things I need to tell you before it's too late. Dad." Elliot stared at the letter for a long time. He read it once, twice, then folded it neatly and placed it back in the envelope, leaving it on his kitchen table like something too fragile to touch. His girlfriend Sarah found him sitting at the window that night, untouched tea in hand. "Everything okay?" she asked. He nodded, then shook his head. "It's from my dad." Sarah knew about Elliot's past, though only in fragments. He never liked to talk about home, about his father, Frank Carter, a carpenter with hands like oak and a silence like steel. "What will you do?" she asked gently. "I don't know," he whispered. But he did know. Deep down, beneath the pride and pain, he knew exactly what he would do. Part 2. Return to Maple Hollow. Maple Hollow was smaller than he remembered. Or maybe he had just grown too large for it, too filled with city lights, deadlines, and grown-up disillusion. The streets still wound like sleepy rivers. The diner still sat on Main Street with its peeling teal paint and the smell of burnt coffee. And Carter's carpentry, his father's workshop, still stood, though the sign was weather-worn, its letters faded like memory. Elliot parked in front of the house he hadn't seen since he was 19. The porch light flickered on, the door opened, and there he was. Frank Carter looked older, thinner, his once solid frame now stooped, shoulders drawn like someone used to bracing for impact. But the eyes were the same, sharp, quiet, storm gray. "Hey," Elliot said, his voice almost cracking. Frank nodded once. "You came?" Elliot stood awkwardly with his hands in his pockets, suddenly a boy again. "I got your letter." A pause. "Wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't either." Frank stepped aside. "You hungry?" It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a warm welcome. But in the language of the Carters, it was a beginning. Part 3. The silence between words. The kitchen hadn't changed much. The same linoleum floor, the same chipped mugs hanging from the wall rack. The air smelled like black coffee and cedar, a scent Elliot had forgotten he remembered. They sat at the table, father and son, with bowls of beef stew between them. Neither spoke for a long while. The clinking of spoons filled the silence like hesitant conversation. "How's the city?" Frank asked finally. "It's fine. I do graphic design now." Frank nodded like he understood, though Elliot knew he didn't. Technology had always baffled his father. He still used a flip phone, assuming it hadn't broken. "You still working wood?" Elliot asked, surprising himself. Frank shrugged. "Not much anymore. The arthritis is worse. Hard to hold a chisel steady these days." Elliot looked down at his hands, smooth, uncalloused, a world away from the hands that had raised him. "You were always good at it," he said quietly. Frank didn't respond, just took another bite of stew. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, just unfamiliar, like a room you hadn't entered in years. But beneath it, there was movement, tiny shifts, quiet openings. Before bed, Elliot stood in the doorway of his old room. The posters were gone, the shelves mostly bare, but the desk he'd built with his father when he was 14 still sat under the window. He touched it lightly. There was a note taped to the corner. "If you need time, take it. I'll be here." "Dad." Something in Elliot's chest cracked open just a little. Part 4, Small Repairs. The next morning, Elliot woke to the sound of hammering. He wandered outside in flannel pajamas to find his father in the shed, struggling to fix a broken door hinge. Tools lay scattered like forgotten thoughts. "You're up early," Frank muttered. "So are you." Frank stepped back, wincing as he shook his hand. "Used to be easier." Elliot moved forward without a word, picked up the screwdriver, and knelt. They worked together in silence, the kind that no longer felt awkward, just steady, like rain on a roof. After a while, Frank said, "Remember the treehouse?" Elliot looked up. "Of course. You let me design it. You were 10. And insisted on a spiral staircase." Elliot grinned. Frank almost smiled. "I built the whole thing anyway. You never told me what you thought of it." Frank looked at him. "Didn't think I had to." They kept working. The hinge was old, but salvageable. Like us, Elliot thought. Later that afternoon, they sat on the back porch watching the sun dip behind the maple trees. Frank sipped coffee. Elliot drank tea. "You left without saying goodbye," Frank said suddenly. Elliot froze. "I know," he replied. "I was angry. I thought you didn't care." "I did," Frank said, voice low. "I just didn't know how to show it." Elliot looked at his father. Really looked. Not the man he'd resented, not the silence he had blamed, but a person, flawed, tired, trying. "I didn't know how to ask for it," Elliot admitted. They sat without speaking again, but this time it felt full, like words were being exchanged, just not aloud. Part 5. What was left unsaid. That evening, Elliot found a small wooden box on his bed. Inside was a stack of photographs, some old and curling at the edges, others more recent. He flipped through them slowly. There he was, age 7, holding up a crooked birdhouse. His father stood behind him, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Another, the two of them fishing at the lake, sunburned and smiling. And then a photo Elliot had never seen before, his high school graduation. He had thought his father hadn't come. But there, in the far corner of the bleachers, was Frank. Distant, but there. Elliot stared at the picture for a long time. He felt something hot sting behind his eyes. Later that night, they sat by the fireplace, the room dim with soft amber light. "I didn't know you were at graduation," Elliot said. "I sat in the back, didn't want to embarrass you." "Why would you embarrass me?" Frank shrugged. "Didn't know how to be the kind of dad you needed then." "I didn't need perfect. I just needed you to be there." Frank nodded slowly. "I see that now." They were quiet for a long time. The fire crackled, logs shifted. Then Frank said, "I wrote you letters every year on your birthday. Never mailed them." Elliot's breath caught. "Why not?" Didn't think you wanted to hear from me. I kept them in the workshop. Elliot stood up. Show me. Part 6, coming home. The workshop smelled of sawdust and thyme. Frank walked slowly to the corner cabinet and pulled out a tin box. Inside were 16 letters, each one dated, each one addressed to Elliot. He opened the first. The handwriting was rough, but careful. Happy 20th birthday, kid. I miss you. The porch is too quiet without your footsteps. Elliot read another. You always wanted to live big. I hope you are. I hope someone out there sees the brilliance I saw in you, even if I never said it out loud. By the 5th letter, Elliot was wiping tears from his face. I'm sorry, Frank said hoarsely. I didn't know how to say any of it when you were here. I know, Elliot whispered, but you're saying it now. They stood in the dim light, father and son, the weight of years softening between them. When Elliot finally left a week later to return to the city, he hugged his father tightly, something they hadn't done since he was a child. Frank whispered, Don't let it be 17 years again. It won't be, Elliot said. I'm coming back for Thanksgiving. Epilogue. Letters forward. That November, Elliot returned this time with Sarah. Frank made his famous apple pie, and the three of them laughed around the same old table. When Frank passed away 2 years later, Elliot found a final letter tucked in the drawer of the workshop. If you're reading this, I've probably gone, but I want you to know I was proud of you every day. I just didn't always know how to say it. Thank you for coming home. Love, Dad. Elliot framed that letter and placed it on the desk his father built. And when his own son was born a year later, Elliot named him Franklin. To remember, to forgive, to come home. Not just to a place, but to love. However late it arrives. The end.